It's time to explore the world according to Glenn. I'm Kevin Jacobsen. Glenn Close is my favorite actress, and this show is all about exploring the career of one of the finest actors of her generation. Each episode, I'll be joined by a guest as we dive into one of Glenn's movies, TV shows, or stage productions, going chronologically through her career, discussing her performance, and assessing the project itself. And today, we're going back to the world of Sarah Plain and Tall to discuss its two sequels, 1993's Skylark and 1999's Winter's End.
Time nominee Glenn Close, motherfuckers.
My guest today, you heard not that long ago on this show. She's a film critic whose work can be found at Citizen Dame, The Watch and Talk, and is now the associate TV editor at Awards Watch. She joined me for the Sarah Plain and Tall episode a few months ago, and now she is back to complete the saga, I guess you could call it. I could not have anyone else on this episode except for Karen Peterson. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you so much. It's always a joy to be with you.
Yes. Always a joy to be with you and to disappear into this world for a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right. Well, before we talk, Glenn, in Skylark and Winter's End, you, of course, have already told me about your relationship to Glenn Close overall. So I'm going to ask you a fun little alternative question here if you want to do a little creative exercise, which is, if you had the power to cast Glenn Close in a future film, what is the genre and what kind of role would you cast her in?
If you'd asked me this a year ago, I would have said a fun ensemble murder mystery. So, that's taken now.
That worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. But I still am thinking ensembles. I'm thinking heist movie, and she's the leader.
She's the leader.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So is
I'd
this
love
like
to
an
see
Ocean's
her.
8 type of thing?
Something like that, or maybe even like a Sneakers,
Okay.
something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. Have you thought about who could be your co-stars in that?
Oh my
I don't know how
gosh.
far you went with this
I
exercise.
didn't go that far, but I think a true ensemble, like some
Mm-hmm.
younger people, some of her contemporaries, just kind of a nice range. I think it'd be a
That's
lot
really
of fun.
I would love to see that very much. So, and she would obviously be very down to do that. She is pretty much down to do anything these days.
It's
Complimentary. Complimentary.
Yeah. That's one of the things I think is so great about her, is that she just loves to work, clearly, and she's not, like, she takes some great roles, she takes some questionable ones, but she's just there to have fun, and everything. I think every project is better when she's there.
I love that. Yes. And having just watched Wake Up Dead Man, as I'm sure you have as well,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is such the case there. She's having so much fun and really showing her range. So, yeah. Excellent. Would love to see it. Love that we're manifesting this. I totally agree. But today, we're going to be discussing the two sequels to Sarah Plain and Tall, starting first with Skylark from 1993 and then Winter's End from 1999. Both, of course, produced through Hallmark Hall of Fame, as the first one was, after the first film's massive success, having attracted viewership from more than 20 million households, not even viewers, but households, so you could imagine it's probably like double that. So, yeah, even though both Glenn and her co-star Christopher Walken were booked and busy in the 90s, they still made time for these, and it was especially important to Glenn, who was saying in interviews at the time that she and the author of the original books, Patricia McLaughlin, had planned for a movie trilogy from the start, essentially, and Glenn got really attached to these characters. So this was not by any means like a cash grab type of situation for her. She was actively involved in developing these. as a producer. And so they also had a bigger budget for Skylark, which allowed them to film on location in both Kansas and Maine. And most of the cast returned, including Glenn, Christopher, Lexi Randall, and Christopher Bell as their kids, Anna and Caleb, and James Rephorn as Sarah's brother, William. So, starting first with Skylark. Skylark is set a few years after Sarah Plain and Tall. Sarah, of course, played by Glenn, has now gotten accustomed to life on the farm in Kansas with Jacob, played by Christopher Walken, and their kids, Anna and Caleb. But the family soon faces a new threat when Kansas suffers a severe drought for months on end, which leads to a devastating fire on their farm. And after a while, they agree to have Sarah go back to her hometown in Maine with the kids so they can sort of continue their education and be looked after while Jacob attends to the farm. And so we see how Sarah is contemplating her life as she adjusts more or less back into the life she had before, while also missing Jacob and the kids acclimating to their new environment. And we also learn that Sarah's pregnant with Jacob's child, and much of the conflict is just the difficulty of their separation. So yes, let's talk Skylark. Thoughts on this sequel, whether you think it holds up compared to the first one, and your thoughts on Glenn.
I will start off by saying that I don't think this is quite to the heights of the first movie. I think that it kind of falls off a little bit. It definitely has a little bit of that sequel slump. But it's also just a nice place to revisit, like you were saying. And these are just such lovely characters. And I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to Winter's End. But one of the things I like about the timing of the release is this is released 2 years after the first one. And so we're just kind of where the first one ended, it's like Sarah had decided to stay, but now we get to see how things turned out for her. And then the third movie is several years later when the kids have grown up a lot. And so I like kind of picking this up. We obviously knew at the end of the first movie that Jacob and Sarah were going to get married, but getting to really see that she's settled into this life and that she's the kids call her mom. She's very much a part of the community. We get to spend a lot of time with just seeing their day to day as we're learning that the drought has taken hold. And, of course, there's the obligatory shots of Jacob like sifting through the dirt on his property so that we know that the land is dry and things like that. But I think that it's a nice entry point back into their story. And, where the first movie, the conflict was, is Sarah going to stay? This one, for the first half of it, the conflict is, will she please leave and take the kids so that they, can, as you said, so that, they can continue life and Jacob can do what he needs to do without having to worry about the family.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, actually, I forgot to even ask, had you seen this one before or just the first one?
I think I'd only seen the first one. None of this was familiar to me, so I don't know what happened.
Yeah, because I was going to mention, I only have a memory of seeing the first one as a kid. Do not recall seeing either of these sequels, so yeah, this definitely felt like a first watch for me. Kind of like you said, a bit of a step down, as most sequels tend to be, just in the sense that, we're settled into what this world is. There's not as much fun sort of discovery here. I know these are all kind of like vague sequel complaints, but I think it does apply a little bit here too. I think thankfully though, Sarah does get some juicy material just as a character that really allows for Glenn to play with multiple layers in her performance and is really allowing us more into Sarah's thought process on her relationship and her priorities and, going back to Maine kind of. It's like, I had this thought while I was watching where I was like, it's not a one-to-one by any means, but it reminded me a little bit of Brooklyn with Saoirse Ronan, where it's like how we have this dynamic of this woman who goes out on this new adventure and gets used to her life in this one place. And then for one reason or another, she is drawn back to her hometown, and it has like all the familiar smells and the friendly people and everything, but it's also something feels different now because she is different in a way, and she starts to miss her life that she's kind of forged for herself.
There's sorry to jump ahead to that, but like there's a lovely scene at the end of the movie where she's talking to Jacob And she says, I think the reason I needed to come back was because I needed to say goodbye. And I
Right.
think that's so beautiful because when she decided to stay at the end of the first movie, she never went home. Like, this is her first time going home after she came out for a trial period and ended up getting married, you know?
Yeah.
And so I love that idea that she never had that opportunity to say goodbye to her life there, really. And now that's what she needs to do.
Yeah. It's a nice closure. And I
Mm.
find myself kind of drawn to these kinds of stories personally, which is why I think, I don't know about you, but I feel like I connected a little more to this one than the third one,
Yeah.
which,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about it, but Winter's End feels a little bit more familiar, I would say, and predictable in the story being told there with the, relationship between fathers and sons. But
Yeah. A little more emotionally manipulative to me too, if
yeah,
I'm being
that too.
honest.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think in this case, this is enriching her story. And I think Glenn is so settled into this role that I think it's yet another example of how I just instantly feel like she is this character and so headstrong and knows how to raise up these children with compassion and conviction and all these wonderful things. But, her being back at home kind of starts to complicate things in a way. So,
Yeah.
I'd say
Yeah.
she's on an even plane with her first performance here.
I would agree with that. And I think
Yeah.
that there are some really really good moments for her, especially when the drought is taking hold and like their friends are leaving and she's trying to figure out what to do and she's getting so frustrated and she
Yeah.
gets mad because things aren't working the way that they should be working and everything's hard and then the barn burns down and just everything is just kind of piling on top of her and just she carries that emotionally really really well and it feels like a natural sequel to the first movie, I think.
Yeah. And that's a big part of what Glenn wanted to do with this sequel is to not just have it feel like I mentioned before, like a cash grab. Like she wanted to make the story more complex and not have it feel like that standard sequel. Like I think some of the establishing stuff at the beginning certainly feels that way, but I think the film, just to kind of go through it from the beginning, establishes well enough for people who, had forgotten from 2 years ago what this dynamic was. It's a nice way how she kind of is speaking to the children about her feelings about her relationship with Jacob. It's like a nice kind of easy cheat because it's like this is how you would naturally talk to a child in the way that she's kind of talking to us and sort of catching us up, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and she's showing that she is such a deep thinker the way she talks about how like she can look beyond the surface of what people such as their father might say or and know what they really mean. Like she says something along the lines of how like she can read between the lines of like whenever he would write a letter to her, she understood what he was communicating even though he wasn't actually saying those things.
Yeah.
So I think that's what people relate to is that emotion or respect, I guess, about it is she has that emotional intelligence.
Yeah, yeah, because they talk about him not being always great with words, but she is so good with people and with understanding what's in their hearts and we
Mm-hmm.
really see that between the two of them.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I really like about this film and the others in this trilogy is just how we get those quieter moments where like there's even a bit of like a pregnant pause between characters. Like they don't have to be long-winded or anything like that. It just for me kind of informs the relationships between them and show how like I guess in a way too showing us as a viewer the appeal of this like quieter farm life and why Jacob is so attached to it and why it has a certain appeal because it is so peaceful. It's humble. There's a certain ownership for them in taking care of the whole property on your own. So I just, even though as a film, it's not one that is going to be like, winning any director prizes for the showiness of what's happening here, it is very effective, quiet storytelling that kind of matches the personalities of the characters, I guess. So even though it's very subtle, I found myself kind of like drawn in back to the rhythms, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a rush. Nothing is
Yeah.
hurried. Everything is, kind of taken as it comes, and they you really get to feel I like how you just said it, the appeal of this kind of life, and sort
Yeah.
of um this unhurried, just we take care of our chores for the day, we, spend time together, we sing, we dance, whatever, but it's just this it's this just the sense of peacefulness, and
Yeah.
just living in the is very present. It's a very present movie, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's eventually some conflict a little bit in town at the store when like one of the other women says that her family's well has dried up, so they're forced to leave town. And that kind of just like baffles Sarah in a way. And she kind of wonders out loud to all the other people in the store about like, kind of like, why can't we all just rally and work harder to provide for each other? And, is really like projecting at one point of being like, how can anybody just give up to
Yeah.
all the other women in the store? And I think another one of them suggests like she doesn't understand because she really hasn't been like a local for long enough in a sense. And that's another thing, is that I think we're still getting like an indication that even though she's settled into town, she's not fully acclimated to like the full way of life for these people, that she is still looked upon by some people as a little bit of an outsider. So that's, something that's carried over from the first film that I think is key, but it also shows that Sarah's very critical thinker, very determined, and that she won't just give up or go along with other people giving up either, that she has her own mind, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
And it's
that's
not
true.
like overly didactic about making that point for her,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. And she also needs to have those experiences of people being like, you don't understand what you're talking about. Like these
Yeah.
people have been there much longer. Their families have been there. Jacob has the line about his family's name written in the dirt.
Yeah.
And that's how this community is. They've been through droughts before. They've been through flooding, and it's the plains, they've been through it all. She
Mm-hmm.
hasn't. This is her first time experiencing this, and knowing what this challenge really is, where she's come from. She's never had to deal with anything like this. So even though, on a personal level, she's really close friends with all these people, she doesn't know this life yet. And she's still learning that. And that's one of the reasons I like that this takes place not that long after the first movie, because we really see that there's still some learning and growing that she needs to do.
Yeah. And we're not judgmental either way, I think, towards those different perspectives.
Yeah. Like for
So,
me, being from Southern California,
right.
I get where she's coming from. It's like, what do you mean we're just gonna let these people go because their well is dry? Like
Mm-hmm.
I get that perspective, but I also understand the
Yeah.
perspective of the townspeople of like, well, this is just how it is.
There's also a scene where like they have to stamp out this wildfire on their farm, which I took note of because like she keeps insisting over and over again to Jacob how she is not going to leave. She refuses to leave, and is just like trying to hammer that home. I do love that sweet little moment though, sort of I think in that scene too, where Caleb is asking if she dreams of rain, and she says she does, and he's like, that's good, that means it'll come true. I love that little boy. I can't help it. Like just his utter devotion to Sarah. I talked about it
Mhm.
last time, but like I have to insist. This would be me. Like this kid has my dream gig at like 6 or 7 years old, just like totally in awe of this magical woman, Mary Poppins-esque woman who's come into his life.
Yeah.
Played by Glenn.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, their relationship is so sweet and just so lovely. And he's so accepting of her.
Mm,
And I also really like Anna too, played by
yeah.
Lexi Randall, seeing the way that their relationship has deepened too. And how she really does respect Sarah as a mother, and really has come to love her, and there that conflict, that's I think where the it's this is very much a people versus nature conflict in this movie, because the people have figured things out. Like there's not a lot of conflict within the family other than Sarah and Jacob still butting heads because they always will. but
Mm-hmm.
but I like the fact that that conflict doesn't extend to a step parent and stepchildren dynamic too, that it's just
Right.
this is just our family now.
Yeah. And I also think it's important, just it was more emphasized in the first one, but how Anna and Caleb feel so differently at first about Sarah, because Anna
Mhm.
had gotten used to her mother and Caleb never knew their mother really. So, yeah, I think that's carried over nicely here. And also just I think it's important for Caleb to like to know that even when things get scary, that there is still some hope. As kind of corny as that sounds, it's like, just having that parental figure who can assure him and be like, yes, I dreamed of rain, like it is possible, this could get fixed one day. Just having that, I think, is so key. And I don't know if he would necessarily get that from his father per se.
Yeah, I don't think his father's one for being the comforting hand. He's just kind of like, well, we're just gonna deal with this, And
Yeah.
even though Jacob knows that the rain's gonna come eventually, I don't know when, I don't know how, but
Mm-hmm.
and that's difficult, but he knows he's been through it before. It'll happen. And so he doesn't feel the need to let Caleb know like it's gonna be fine. Whereas Sarah
Mm-hmm.
needs I think she needs that assurance as much as Caleb and Anna
Yes,
do.
certainly.
And so she's kind of manifesting it by giving that to them. And
Yeah.
going back really quickly to the fact that she won't leave, I think part
Mm.
of it, which I don't think is really spoken out loud, or if it is, I maybe missed it, but I think part of the reason that she's afraid to or doesn't like so reluctant to leave is because she's afraid she won't want to come back.
Yeah.
So, and
I
I
think
think that's
that's,
really important.
yeah, right. And I think we get to a point also of like making the best of like a shitty situation in a way for the family. Like when Jacob has like the community surprise Sarah with this little gathering at their farm where they play
Mhm.
music and they dance, and she's just touched that he would make such a grand gesture for her. And he doesn't even have to say much in that moment. It's just this loving gesture that like clearly is touching her. And it shows how even though conditions are getting worse and worse, sometimes you just have to have that escape. Like it doesn't have to be all misery and gloom. Like they have each other. And yes, again, it's cheesy as I'm describing it, but I think the effectiveness of these films is in the sweetness and the humanity within, especially moments like that, and the sincerity of these performances. And so when you have those kinds of scenes, you get to that point later on where you absolutely understand why Sarah would feel like I can't first of all, I can't stay in Maine, and in this moment now, she'd be like, I can't leave here.
Yeah. Well, and I think not just with the Sarah Plain and Tall series, but just in general, Hallmark Hall of Fame, that's kind of what they were for, was these
Yeah.
really nice movies that did have some conflict and did have some people went through trials, they went through hard times, but the idea of it was always that it was really about the people and about, just being together, loving each other, taking care of one another, and sort of the community around that. And I think that's what made them such a successful series throughout the 90s. And in it's unfortunate that they are a little on the cheesy side because I think we need some of this again now. And I just don't
Hmm.
see them being as impactful now. I
Yeah.
think they'd be memed to death these days.
Unfortunately. Yeah. I agree. But we get one big our sort of requisite nature disaster scene here.
Yeah.
Like we had the hurricane or whatever in the first one. I think it was a hurricane. I don't remember.
Tornado and stuff.
Or
Yeah.
tornado. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. And then here we have a big fire. And we're gonna get a blizzard in the third one. So I love that we always get the one action set piece everyone's wanting, I guess. But I mean, that's a quite scary moment, like a great moment for Christopher Walken as he just has to like stand back and watch this uncontrollable fire just envelop the barn and just everything that's in it. It's it's devastating. And I think having, sort of for me watched personally from afar the experiences of people in LA this past year, talking about their experiences of seeing their homes go up in flames or like returning to find this fully burnt down property, like it really resonates. I think it's just the shock of it, and it's just unthinkable. And I think this film really captures that feeling very well.
Yeah, you can feel that devastation, even though their house is still standing, even though the animals are safe. Like
Yeah.
you still feel the devastation, all the work and everything that went into that, and him being so helpless as he watches this part of his property burn, and also not knowing how he's gonna rebuild that. How's he gonna do that work?
Yeah, it's an effective sequence, I would say. Not
Yeah.
as like huge as the tornado in the first one, but yeah, feels very practical how they filmed it too. So
Yeah, it's a different type of traumatic event, I guess, from
yeah,
the first movie, a very different type, because this one, again, there's nothing they can do about it, but in this case, there's
right.
really nothing he can do except for just watch it happen. And everybody's safe and he can keep them that way, but it's just all that work and history is lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tragic. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so from there, Jacob kind of resolves to just pick up the pieces again and stay at the farm, and the kids still have to, be taken care of. So she is like, well, I really have no choice at this point. It's for the welfare of the kids more than anything that to go back to her hometown in Maine. And so it kind of becomes like two different movies at that point where we're going back and forth between the two. But yeah, just that mix of emotion that Sarah's going through in this return, I found very authentic, because like she's left this place behind and she's gotten used to her new life and she's fallen in love with her husband, and like he's there, their life is there. And we kind of linger on her face in that moment as she takes in this environment again, as we see like the memories flooding back to her of, again, like those old familiar smells and the climate, and just being able to see some life again, like these simple things like water and the greenery. It's very like sensory overload in a very effective way, and it's sweet to see it through the kids' eyes too, just almost like these kids, like how like some kids have never seen snow and they see it for the first time. Like that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, when Caleb sees the ocean and
Yeah.
he's just so amazed because it's just been, hypothetical to him.
Right.
And now it's right there stretching out before him, and getting just the kids getting to see all the things that she's only ever talked about. And it's really sweet it's a sweet moment for her to get to introduce the kids to the people that she left behind, her brother, the
Yeah.
aunts, like the town people. But I really liked how you worded at the beginning where she's changed, so even though everything is familiar, it's also different now, and you really get that sense. But there's this it's a beautiful, like, nostalgic melancholy where you don't even necessarily know that she's thinking, well, I can't stay here, but you kind of get that sense this isn't where her life is anymore. And I think from the moment she steps off the train, once they get to Maine, I think she already kind of feels that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just a matter of just kind of waiting, I guess, and
Yeah.
just kind of revisiting things, but knowing that this is a temporary visit.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't permanent.
Right. And I just like that it's not rushed, that sense. Like you do have to kind of, like go through that process. And it does take a few days to really understand like where your home really is, and to finally have that closure and say
Mhm.
goodbye. And I do really enjoy the scenes where she's with those wonderful aunts of hers, and who are so unbelievably excited to see her again. And one of them observes that she's pregnant,
Mhm.
which Sarah doesn't even really seem to know herself. But the way it kind of registers on her face, like, oh, actually, that might explain things, perhaps. How I might have felt. Just the
Yeah.
emotion kind of coming to the surface for her, and realizing like that all clicking into place. That like she had worried so much about everything that she probably barely had time to even think about herself in that way, I guess, as like that being a possibility. But it's like there's something intuitively that, this other woman is seeing in her, that glow. And I just love how Glenn communicates that kind of like self-discovery, I guess. Like this person knowing this before she even knows it herself. It's really sweet.
Yeah, yeah. I love that shot, that look on her face as one of the ants is saying it, and sort of that, oh, okay, yeah. And she's happy. There's this peaceful happiness that she kind of exudes, and it's really just a really nice moment.
Yeah, there's also this really nice scene by the sea with one of them where she's talking about how like, the green isn't as vivid as she remembered, or that like the sea isn't as comforting to her. And, this other woman is telling her about not wanting to kind of hold Sarah back in a way from going out there in the world. And Sarah talks about how hard it is, like going out there on your own, and how she was frightened, but that there is just a sense of like a quiet sort of like resolve in her performance in that scene, that she feels good about her choice to leave, that she gained a sense of self in doing so, which is really lovely. Again, it's like, they're talking very directly about these things, but it doesn't feel too on the nose in a way that just makes the dialogue kind of cringy, I guess. Like it feels like very natural conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I know that's like kind of treating these movies with kid gloves, but like when we talk about some of the movies that come out today, even from Hallmark, like there's a clunkiness there that this doesn't really have.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the screenplay was written by the author of the books. She knows these characters really well, and she treats them with a lot of respect and dignity.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the sequence in Maine is, and with the kids and everything adjusting, I think that shows on some level, like it is nice for them, but it's also like it makes us sort of long for the farm in a way. Like even when the boy is asking, or yeah, Caleb is asking if this is their new home, the way she kind of hesitates and she can't really verbalize with a yes or no. Because I think she knows like, this might be good for the kids and everything, but she also is missing their home on the farm and their routines. And so she just kind of like sings to him to kind of soothe him a little bit and change the subject sort of. But yeah, I think she's recognizing even there, like, no, this is not going to be our new home.
Right. But if she says it right then we don't know what's going to happen. So just to leave us in a little bit of suspense too.
Yeah. And so like in between all that, we have some of Christopher Walken at the farm, just kind of tending to things by himself. And, it's not the most riveting per se, but eventually the rain does come, and the way he shows how just like full of relief and exhaustion he is when it finally rains and he just sits there in it and just takes it all in. I think that's a great scene for him. Like in general, this doesn't give him a whole lot to do, especially compared to the third one. But, I do think he does bring like a real soulfulness to this performance, even if once again he is just using his regular Christopher Walken voice and still has not tried to do anything with it.
No, he hasn't. What I like about these movies though, and him in them, is that it is a much quieter and more subdued performance than we see in anything else that he does. So and I think that scene that you're talking about is a perfect example of the quiet that he brings to Jacob, and how like instead of dancing in the rain or singing and shouting or whatever, he just sits and just kind of revels in it in that way. I like it.
Yeah. And kind of to the point you're making, like I don't know if Christopher Walken, like the first thing you lead with is his facial expression per se, like it's usually the voice, but I think this franchise, I guess, gives him a lot of opportunity to do a lot of good face acting.
Yeah, it's true.
And so when we get to the reveal that Jacob has made the trek to Maine, I think that's a really sweet moment too, of clearly having missed his family And a nice echo from the first film where he goes to chase after Sarah at the end to make sure she didn't leave on the train. And so, yeah, they have this lovely little dialogue at the end where she takes him out to the sea for him to go see it. And he tells her that he loves her and there are certain things that can't be written down in a letter, and tells him like she never thought he'd come. And she's confessing that she like saw his face everywhere she went when they were separated. And it's just a really lovely speech, the way she expresses like her devotion. And so, I mean, I think she's also recognizing that like this is yet another grand, lovely gesture from him. Like that seems to be like his love language, is like demonstrating how much he loves her through these huge kind of like effortful things that he does, and she just loves him for that. And yeah, I just think it's sweet. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I like that about Jacob because as we said, he's a very quiet person, but when he's wanting to show how he feels, he does these big grand gestures. And I really like that he goes to Maine to get his family. Because it's very much from the beginning, it's very much Jacob won't leave the farm. Jacob's not going to leave. He's not going to leave Kansas. And this is just where, this is where he lives and this is what he knows and this is what he's going to stay with. And so I love that he gets on the train and he goes to get his family. They don't even know he's coming. And he, part of it is that it's big that he left. And part of it is I love that he actually took the opportunity to see where Sarah was from, because
yeah,
the kids got to have that experience. Now he gets to have that too. And he gets to see what she gave up to come and be with him and his kids.
And that is just going to strengthen their relationship, and make that love from her to him feel that much more meaningful, I suppose.
And then there's that sweet moment where she tells him that they're going to have a baby. And she's like, some things can't be written in letters. And so cute.
Yes, that is just the lovely little Hallmark sentiment that we love. Yes, and of course she comes home and writes her name in the land. That's kind of symbolizing that she has made that commitment. I just love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think overall, like I said, a tiny bit of a step down, even though we had some mostly positive things to say there. But yeah, I think just like with the characters being separated, you kind of miss that dynamic of the first film when they were all together the whole time. That, I don't know, that seems to be like a template for sequels, I guess, is to like separate the characters for some reason. But
yeah,
it's still, like, I would say relatively consistent with the tone and just the warmth of the first one. So, maybe it could have gone a little deeper with its themes, but I would say this was like a pretty satisfying sequel to the people who loved the first one.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, let us go transition to 6 years later and talk Sarah Plain and Tall, Winter's End. I don't know why the second one didn't have a Sarah Plain and Tall, Skylark, or Skylark, a Sarah Plain and Tall story.
Yeah, I don't know.
We see today. I don't know.
I don't know why they did it with this movie, other than maybe people were confused by a movie that was just called Skylark. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, quite a break in between 2 and 3 compared to the first one, where it was only 2 years. This is an adaptation of Patricia McLaughlin's third book in the series called Caleb's Story. This is a little looser than the past adaptations, and this film is also quite a bit more interior compared to the first two, to the point that I would almost call it like a chamber drama, with the family kind of cooped up in the house for the winter. So once again, the cast all returned, but worth noting, because it's been 6 years, there is quite a growth spurt for Lexi Randall and Christopher Bell, to the point that I almost wondered, like, are they being played by different actors here? Like, what's going on? Like, I don't know if I recognize them, especially Christopher Bell.
That's funny that you say that, because I was just like, oh man, they look exactly the same.
I just was like, I wasn't used to them being that size, because I like watched them pretty much back to back. I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yes, once I actually saw their face, it's like, yes, of course, that's them. But it just took me a little back. It's like watching Boyhood, and suddenly you're like, oh my God, this little boy is a high schooler now. Anyway, so Winter's End follows the Whittings during the wintertime. It's 1918, so the First World War is going on, and Anna is old enough to start working and now works as a nurse. She also has a boyfriend who is away in the war. Meanwhile, Sarah has given birth to a daughter, Cassie, played by Emily Osment, one of her first roles. She's a very talkative, blunt little girl, and as the family tries to make it through another winter, a stranger suddenly comes to the farm, played by Jack Palance, who claims that he is Jacob's father, John, who Jacob had long assumed dead since Jacob was a kid. So the film follows Sarah's efforts to get Jacob and his father to reconcile, but this proves much more difficult in practice because Jacob is still kind of traumatized by the experience and realizing that, like, John didn't die, and he actually abandoned his family back in the day. And so after Jacob and John fight, Jacob is injured and thus more or less stuck in the house as he and his father gradually go on the path towards reconciling. So yes, let's get into this third and final installment here. Karen, thoughts on Winter's End?
Oh, this movie frustrated me so much.
Okay, let's get into it.
Oh man. So, first of all, there are a lot of stories about parents who took off, weren't part of their kids' lives. They come back much, much later, kind of when they're maybe on their deathbeds or just have a lot of things that they want to reconcile. And they expect their grown children to just welcome them back in and be okay with all the years of neglect and trauma. And that's what we have here. And in fact, like, I don't think the overall story idea is bad, but one of the things that frustrated me the most watching it was how John, when he's being questioned, like, why did you leave and all that, he's I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to, like, he literally is saying, I just want you to accept that I'm here and I'm back and I care, and don't ask me any questions about where I've been or why. It's just like, yep. What are you talking about? You owe us some explanations, dude.
Yeah. So, yeah. I also find that the way that the film sort of decentralizes Sarah from the story a bit frustrating. I don't know about you, but like, she's a key cog in this. Like, she is obviously being like the middleman here between the two, but like, I don't know if this would be the one that I would call Sarah Plain and Tall Winter's End, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. That's what's so weird. It's like, okay, yeah, this is definitely the same characters. This is part of all the same franchise, but this really is not Sarah's story. This is Jacob's story told through Caleb's eyes, because now Anna has passed the mantle of family storyteller onto Caleb. And so this is really about the boys in the family. This isn't about the girls, although Cassie has a lot to do. And you can really see the makings of a star in Emily Osment, I think, even at 6 years old. It's no surprise that she would go on to have the career that she would. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the way that Sarah really takes a back seat to this, I think honestly makes them is a big part of why the movie is so much less compelling and why the story just doesn't move as well, because Sarah is the beating heart of this family. And yeah, like, you really feel that loss when she's not as involved.
I certainly do. Yeah. And sort of like you're saying, the idea of like this man who is still harboring ill will toward his father, and then the father being kind of blunt and stoic and not willing to open up. Like, a lot of this feels very familiar, and like the struggle to forgive him, all that stuff. And then of course they reach that catharsis point at the end. To me, it's like not very specific to this particular franchise, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like, and it tracks for me that like this is the film that is most divergent from Patricia McLachlan's text. Like, you know, it doesn't really make much use of the farm. It's very interior, which is fine, and I do generally like those kinds of like stories, but I don't know. I don't think this has quite the special sort of magic that the first two have, even though I think the performances are pretty good. Like, Christopher Walken certainly gets quite a bit to do here compared to the other two and is effective. And Jack Palance, you know, playing another hardened old man, which he would play very often in this time period. And Glenn, she's putting in fine work, but it sort of feels like watching this, it's like her overall arc in this trilogy is essentially over. Like, she's already kind of worked out everything for her personally. So now she just kind of has to serve other people's stories. So, like, she gets some stuff to do towards the end when she's stuck in the blizzard, I guess. But, like, I don't know. I was a little disappointed there.
Yeah, I was disappointed by a lot of it. So,
Okay.
and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I
Mm-hmm.
was watching this last night and I was just like, what went wrong here? You know? And I think a big thing that would have possibly fixed it is to have Sarah be more involved in bringing John and Jacob together than she actually does. It's, when Jacob has his accident, she's not even real. I mean, she's there, she's taking care of him, but that's kind of really all she has to do. She talks to John, she lets him be part of Caleb and Cassie's lives. And, she'll be on the phone with Anna, but it's like so much of what she's doing is just kind of being in the background. She's not really involved in the main story other than to just kind of help one character move forward in their own plot. And I think having this where Jacob thought his father was dead for his whole life until now, and there's not really, it doesn't take a long time for him to accept and understand that this guy isn't just saying he's my father, he really is. I think that, I don't know. I think not that I needed this to be a whole mystery, is he, isn't he? But I think that the fact that he thought his father was dead is really not needed. I think knowing that his dad took off would have been sufficient. And then having Sarah there trying to say, well, but he came back now, having her be this
Right.
intermediary, I think in a more substantial way probably would have helped things feel a little bit better, and when we get to
Mm-hmm.
the point where John finally starts opening up about why he left, that's even more infuriating because he's talking about how his wife never wanted to come to the farm. He basically made her come to the farm and then she hated it and then he left. It's like, so
Yep.
you drag her there and then abandon her. And we're
It's
just
so
supposed to
messed
be
up.
like, well, but you're old
Yeah.
and dying, so we forgive you. No.
No. No. It's yeah, and if it wasn't, like, I'm sorry if this sounds pejorative, but like if it wasn't a Hallmark movie, I think maybe we would dig a little deeper into that, like the
Yeah.
psychology of everything. But for this kind of a story in this format, I don't know if this really works. It's a much heavier film compared to the first two. Like, there is that theme of war and how there's like influenza too. Like, there's a kind of like profound sense of death and illness here, and I think you're feeling the heaviness and obviously the cool color scheme and everything, like the winter setting, the more serious tone. It's just not really something I think fans of this franchise were looking for. I suppose.
Yeah. It tries to do too much and it doesn't do any of it
Yeah.
particularly well.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. I mean, what do you think of like Jack Palance though, like in his performance? Do you think this is kind of like more par for the course of what he was kind of doing
Yeah, yeah. Well,
around that time? Yeah.
like with all the adults, I think the performances are good. I don't think that
Yeah.
Christopher Bell grew up to be an actor. And
No.
Lexi
No.
Randall a little rough too.
Yeah.
But they're still cute. But I think Jack Palance, Glenn Close, and Christopher Walken are all still very good. They're giving good performances. It's just that
Yeah.
the material that they're given to work with just doesn't live up to their capabilities. And I do think the fact that this is a Hallmark movie is a lot to do with that because
Hmm.
they do want it to just be nice and neat and wrapped up with a pretty bow. And I think, yeah, if this was going to be like a more serious movie, it would have dealt with some of these themes with a little bit more nuance and depth. But I do
Yeah.
think that they needed to just simplify the story in order to have the pretty ending that they were looking for.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not saying that it needs to be like Affliction, like like that came out like
Right.
I think the year before, but the Paul Schrader movie that's incredibly bleak.
Hmm.
But I think we could have pushed it a little more and really gotten into the depth of like how Jacob feels so betrayed and everything. And perhaps came up with a better reason for John leaving, like you said. Like, I don't know if that's really justified in any way, but for Sarah, like, she does get some relatively interesting things to do with, like, even trying to teach the kids not to be too judgmental towards him at first, which I find kind of interesting. Like they're sort of debating what he wants. Like, is he a robber? Is he just like this wayfaring stranger or whatever? And I think she's really setting an example for them to not be too fearful and not to like judge too much right off the bat, that like, it's okay to be cautious. You can't just let anyone into your home, but like, you also shouldn't be judgmental in a way. And I think like she's really sort of leading by example and being like, okay, I'm kind of like trusting you sort of cautiously, but still using my emotional intelligence to figure out how to make my way through this.
Yeah. Because Sarah is still a good and smart person. And so we still get to see that from her. I mean, a sick stranger shows up at her home during a flu pandemic, and she lets him stay there. Maybe not the best idea, but she also does ask questions. She doesn't just say, "Oh, come on in, let me nurse you back to health." She does her due diligence as best she can there. So
very practical. Were there anything else you want to say about the kids in this? I mean, we talked a little bit about Emily Osment. I mean, I feel like she is kind of operating in that classic, like, kids say the darndest things type of mode that can be a little grating when the child actor is hamming it up, I would say. But like, I think Emily has a delivery in her comedic timing that is very funny. The way she just like bluntly is asking John, like, if he's a good man, like if he's a robber, all these just like very direct questions.
When she's on the phone talking about him. Oh yeah, grandpa's here, but he's not a good person, but he's not a bad person either. And they're all just sitting right there listening to this conversation. I really like her. And I like what happens with Anna's character. I like the fact that she's grown up, that she she's, got a boyfriend who's off in the war, but she's working. And that's something that, she didn't just stay on the farm. She's in the medical field, she's a nurse, and I like that for her. Caleb, I think they were limited in what they could do with Caleb. So by that point,
I like that with Anna too, because it seems like she is charting her own path in the way that Sarah kind of did, and how that seems like a nice parallel there, that she isn't just stuck on the farm like everyone. And I'm glad also that we actually followed her into like watching her at her job. Like, at first I was just like, okay, did she like not want to do this movie? And they're just like, well, I gotta go to my job and I'll never see you again. Like, I was just like, okay, does Lexi Randall not want to do this? Did she just do like a quickie little scene for them to be like, sorry, I can't be in the movie? But no, we actually follow her, and we're seeing her do her own thing, which is kind of nice.
And I like that she takes it really seriously too. When her father has his accident and the doctor is going to take care of him, and he's got an infection and everything, and he asks her, do you want to come home? And she's like, no, I need to stay here and take care of these patients that we have. Like, she's prioritizing her job. And as you say, it's not just because they don't, they're not putting Lexi Randall in the scenes. It's because the character actually takes it really seriously. I like that.
I mean, to speak a little bit more positively here, I do think that the film does, at least when it comes to Sarah, again, like, that's kind of my window into this for me watching, because it's Glenn, but like showing how she is a really good mediator and knowing how to talk to these men who have enormous amounts of pride, the both of them, and like to not lose her temper too much, because that'll just make them dig their heels in more. But, she also knows when to talk to them very directly and kind of speak their language and not beat around the bush. Like when she's asking John to not waste their time, because I think she also knows that like her husband's probably not going to make the first move here, and that it shouldn't be on him to even make the first move, obviously, because he is the one who is very clearly wronged in this situation. And so she's like, John, you better put up or shut up, essentially.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And again, I think the performances are really good. And I think that the moments that Glenn does get,
Yeah,
she makes the most of them. That's one of the things that makes her the great actress that she is that she doesn't just even if the character is kind of being forced into the sidelines, she still does something with that. And I also really like seeing her the growth of her relationship with the kids too. We really,
right.
she's encouraging Caleb who doesn't feel like he's a writer. She's encouraging that. She's encouraging
Mhm.
Jacob. She's, even being very kind to John. Like she's doing all these things and yeah, I do like that. It's just I think that the story would have been better served if it was more focalized through Sarah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I, in my notes, just like mostly wrote down all of Sarah's scenes because I found them the most interesting. So, like, again, like, there's another scene where she does such a great job of, I guess, sort of modulating her tone in a way to make John understand why this is so hard for Jacob. Like, I think there's that scene at the table where they're sort of hashing it out and she's explaining her history with Jacob and the kids and how they met. And, then John talks about his relationship with his wife and, like you were already saying, how they had these fundamental differences in their priorities and everything. And she gets this really lovely monologue talking about how, like, they say love is enough, but I'm not so sure in a sense that, like, you really have to sometimes put in the work to be there for your family even when it gets tough. The idea of resilience and trust, and that, like, that those you care about will be strong enough to stay, to be there when you need them. The idea of, like, you can't just abandon your family when times get tough, so kind of demonstrating that to him gently through her own experience is how she helps to mediate this whole situation, which
Yeah.
I think is smart. And I would say that things from there go down a very predictable path where Jacob is stuck in the house and he has a lot of time to think. And we also do get at least one more weather-based scene that I wanted to mention, of course, with the blizzard that totally envelops the area. And I think it's Caleb who's going out to, like, attend to one of their cows. And she goes chasing after him into the blizzard. She can barely see. She nearly freezes to death, which leads to the whole family having to come and save her.
I mean, I've heard that if you bury yourself in snow, that it can save you, but I don't know how that's true. Like,
Yeah,
she is frozen.
I had questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the least effective of the three disaster scenes
Mhm.
from this trilogy. Feels a bit
Yeah.
like shoehorned in a bit compared to the other two,
Yeah, it felt like,
I
oh,
would argue.
we need a big scary weather disaster, so let's just do this. And well, also, did I miss it? When did she put on a scarf and a coat? Because she ran out after Caleb just in her night dress. And then the next morning when they find her, she's properly attired. And I was like, wait,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't
that's
know if
not
she
how
had
that
hit
happened.
if she had, like, hid something in the pockets somewhere. I don't know, but very, very fair point,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
But yes, it gives her some nice perspective, and she has a few other speeches about how, like, life is so fragile, like anything can happen in the blink of an eye. I could have died in that blizzard. And, once again, it's sort of hammering home the point of, like, you got to get to a point of forgiveness ultimately, even though one of you is clearly more at fault than the other. It's just like life is too short,
Yeah.
essentially. Is That's kind of just how they wrap it all up here. But
She
to
also
what we've been
needed, I'm
saying,
sorry.
yeah,
Well, she also needed to just accept that Caleb is growing up too. Like he did the right thing.
yeah,
When he couldn't get back to the house, he went into the barn for the night. And the
mm-hmm,
reason she went out there in the first place was because she didn't think that he was going to know what to do and that he was going to be in danger. And she was scared and went looking for him. And she needed to accept that he's growing up and he's capable and she needs to let go a little bit too.
yeah. So I think that's a nice key important scene, even though it feels like we could have done more there, but
Yeah.
that's okay. Yeah, it's it all just leads to that very predictable ending, of course. I don't think we really even need to delve too much into it. It's just exactly how you would think it would play out. Nice. They have that difficult conversation and, father and son reach that point of connection and express their love for each other. And a big happy ending. Everyone's together, including Anna's boyfriend, Justin, who, by the way, I don't know if you caught his name.
No.
His name is Justin Hartley.
Oh my gosh, it is.
Not
You're
to
right.
be confused with the actor Justin Hartley.
Oh, that's so funny.
I just thought that
didn't
was
even
really
put
funny.
that together.
Yep. So
that is funny. One thing I will say about this ending with particularly with John and Jacob is that I like the fact that, from the beginning, we know John is dying of something. He doesn't have long, but we don't go through a funeral. He doesn't die in the movie. And
that's true.
So their closure, it's the sense that he's going to get to spend his last days with his family. And we don't have to go through the process of seeing that part.
Yeah, that's true. In that way, it does sort of subvert where I thought this would ultimately be going, which is like they finally reach that forgiveness point, and then like a few days later, he dies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something. So perhaps not the most ideal or best ending to this trilogy, but in a way, I am glad that it gave Christopher Walken a little more to do here and informed his story a little more. And so, yeah, that's that. Do you have any other thoughts just on this or the trilogy as a whole?
Not really. I mean, they're nice movies. This is definitely
they're nice movies.
Yeah. And I think that these are movies that you don't even have to be I have to see every Glenn Close movie to have a reason to watch them, I think.
Very true. Well, let's get to the release of both of these movies. So Skylark aired on February 7th, 1993 on CBS. It once again was a smash in the ratings with a 23.1 rating, 35 share, which is just like gangbusters at that time. It was the highest rated TV movie since the original Sarah Plain and Tall 2 years prior. So, I mean, just a juggernaut franchise, But yeah, obviously highly anticipated, highly watched. Critics were positive, but not as rapturous as they were for the first one, feeling like this was a little bit stretched out in the drought plot line and there was a little more of a downer. But Glenn did earn another Emmy nomination for her performance. This was also the only nomination for Skylark, but I did just want to quickly visit the other nominees. I don't know if you saw who she was nominated against, but
I did not.
Literally up against all Oscar winners, past and future Oscar winners, I should say. So not all of them had won at the time, but from our vantage point now, all Oscar winners. So yeah, we had Helen Mirren in Prime Suspect 2, Maggie Smith in Suddenly Last Summer, Joanne Woodward in Blind Spot, and the winner, Holly Hunter, in The Positively True Adventures of the Alleged Texas Cheerleading Murdering Mom.
That's a title.
Yes, which I've never seen, but that title is always a gag. So
yeah, I need to find that now.
Yes. And also, what an incredible year for Holly Hunter, winning this Emmy in September and then like winning an Oscar early next year for The Piano. Just what a time.
Yeah.
What a time. And then for Winter's End, that aired on November 21st, 1999 on CBS. It averaged a 13.7 household share and a 21 share, which is a step down, you could say. It also did not get any major awards attention other than Christopher Bell and Emily Osment at the Young Artist Awards.
Interesting.
So, yeah. It was also a nominee at the Costume Designers Guild. Probably safe to say, like, the excitement was a little lower on this one, and on the whole, it was 6 years later. But from looking at the ratings, it still trounced its competition that night, even beating an episode of The X-Files on Fox. So, the excitement was still there. Yeah. So, anyway, with all that said, Did you have any thoughts on how, like, even if these sequels didn't really reach the heights of the first, why you felt like just the interest was still there and maintained a generally positive reception on the whole from, critics and audiences, really?
Well, I think that, it goes back to what we were talking about before with the performances. I think that
Yeah.
especially Glenn and Walken too, I think what they
Mm-hmm.
give to these characters of Sarah and Jacob, it's, you want to just live in this world a little longer, and it's a nice place to revisit.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's just a very heartfelt sensibility to this series that people respond to. Um, for some reason, the word homespun is coming to mind. Like, it's just so down to earth, but also clearly made with a lot of love, and doesn't feel cynical or like it's talking down to the audience per se. Like, it's getting to some real issues without being condescending. Yes, the third one isn't particularly great. Yes, they do have that corny Hallmark feeling a lot of the time, but I think there's just an authenticity that people find refreshing. Even in the 90s, it probably felt a little old-fashioned, especially by 99, but, again, it's just something that I think people really were craving as an alternative to the hellishness of everything else going on in the 90s. Right?
Yeah, yeah, for real. Yeah, and there's a sentimentality to these movies that, yeah, there's a little bit of corniness, but not in an off-putting way. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
it's still something that you can just feel good about watching and not feel put off or embarrassed by, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. So let's get to our last segment where we're going to rate Glenn's performances on a very specific scale. So think about her performance and where Skylark sits in her filmography. Would you say she's ready for her close-up, low Glenn energy, or close but no cigar?
For Skylark, I'm going to say ready for her close-up,
Okay.
which I was not sure where I was going to say until we started talking about the movie.
Okay.
I think what she really brings back to Sarah, and just the way that the way that it feels like a natural progression and growth for her character. And,
Mm.
she has times where you really see her bring that emotion of frustration and anger and sadness and all that. And then just the scenes when she gets to Maine and there's this bittersweet, she knows this is temporary, even if she hasn't said it out loud. And I really like that. And just as we've been talking about it and thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, it's actually a really, really good performance.
It's very funny that you say this because I came into this being like, I am right on the border between the two of them of ready
Hmm.
for her close up and close but no cigar. But to your point, I think, I don't know if it's like fully capturing the magic of the first one because there's such a fun discovery there, but she is just putting in such great work and there's nothing like notably off about it. And she really plays with so many layers of being homesick and finding a home and all these different things in a way that I find very effective and touching. So I'm going to give it a light ready for her close up. It's
Yeah.
not quite as high as Sarah Plain and Tall, but yeah, she's definitely still in the pocket there. So, what about Winter's End? Is that a
Oh,
little different for you?
yeah. This one I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to say close, but no cigar.
Okay.
And really, I think that's less to do with her than it is with just the way that things are written. I
The
don't think
material.
that
Yeah.
I don't think the material
Mhm.
lives up to her, what she can do.
Yep. Same for me. This was not on the border of anything. This was a close but no cigar very easily. Way less to do. She does keep the character consistent, and I am gonna miss Sarah. Like, she really, like, you get attached to her by the end here, but watching 2 and 3 sort of back to back, it's just very clear which one she is better and more favored in, I would say.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, last thing I want to talk about here is where is the Sarah Plain and Tall legacy sequel? Give us Sarah and Jacob as grandparents, like passing down life lessons to their grandkids. Like, we need it.
Yeah,
You know,
let's do it.
it could
Let's
be like
come
an
on,
On Golden
Hallmark.
Pond type of story,
I
right?
think that'd be really sweet. Yeah. I'd like to
Right?
see that.
Yeah. Well, they're still very actively working, both Glenn and Christopher. So
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm just saying. So I don't know what it would be called. I don't know if you can, sorry to put you on the spot, but like,
yeah.
My pitch in my Letterboxd review was Sarah Plain and Tall goes fourth.
That's good.
So, yes. So, putting that out there in the universe. We have so many legacy sequels these days that, like, why not, right?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pitch it to Glenn.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Next time you talk to her.
Right. One of many things I will pitch to Glenn. Yes, I have a whole list. Anyway, Karen, what a treat this was to close out this little section or this era of Glenn in Sarah Plain and Tall. This is a performance that was very meaningful to her going through those three, and I think we did her justice. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been really, it's always like nice. Now I can't talk anymore. It's always so nice to talk with you. And this was such a fun trilogy to get to dive into. So thank you.
I think so too. Well, where can people find more of you on the internet?
You can find my written work at awardswatch.com, and you can find me on social media at Karen M. Peterson, mostly on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Blue Sky.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for listening. You could find me at Kevin_Jacobsen on Twitter and Instagram, just Kevin Jacobsen on Blue Sky. You can also listen to my Oscar-themed podcast, And the Runner-Up Is, for coverage of every single Best Actress race. That's And the Runner-Up Is on all platforms. And to keep up with the world according to Glenn on social, follow The Glenn Pod and rate, review, and follow everywhere you find podcasts. And with that, I will bid you all adieu.